Well, you've heard the word tariffs. What are they? How do they work? And how do they impact you? Today, we go through all the details.
We hope you've been enjoying all the episodes from Secure Your Retirement. If you'd like to keep learning and receiving these episodes, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you receive alerts when they come out. We've helped thousands of listeners get on the path to securing their retirement. Now it's your turn. Let's dive in.
Welcome, everyone, to Secure Your Retirement podcast. Merce and I are excited to be able to talk with you again this week. And in today's topic, we're going to really talk about something that has been a big item in the news. And there are a variety of opinions around this, and that is tariffs. And really what we're going to hit is, what are they? How do they work? And how might they impact you when it comes to your retirement plan? So I want to set this up and let you know that we are not here on this podcast to try to say that a tariff is good or bad, or to make an opinion, or to try to come from that angle. Quite honestly, our real operations that we do here as fiduciaries and as financial advisors is that we feel that we need to be able to understand what's going on in the economy, understand how things are going to get impacted, and then set our clients and those that are going to work with us up in a way that they will not have undue stress. And they can have things that come about maybe that they're not used to, or maybe they didn't know how they work. And maybe these things create anxiety. And so we want to explain it without the rhetoric of one opinion over the other, and simply just kind of go down the path of what it is and how it works. And then we're gonna wrap up this particular episode with saying, what are some things that you can do to be able to be prepared no matter how this plays out with tariffs, no matter how it affects things with pricing. How can we do that? So that's kind of the premise of this particular episode. So we're going to just start right off here in the very beginning, and let's just get a definition. So I'm going to ask you, Merce, if you don't mind, what is a tariff?
Yeah, and that, like you said, that word has been thrown around quite a bit here in 2025. And so a tariff is the basic definition of it. It's a tax that's imposed by a government on goods imported from other countries. And there's a lot of things that people are currently concerned about in the tariff world, and what does that truly mean for me, and who's paying the tariff? That's a big question and sometimes a misunderstanding. But I think there's purposes around a tariff. There's pros and cons to everything. We talk about that all the time when it comes to financial planning, investment strategies. There's no perfect really anything in this world. So it's just, what are we going to end up dealing with in this case of tariffs? And they can be used for multiple different reasons. Protecting domestic industries. So, your U.S., in this case, U.S. based industries, by making imported goods more expensive. So what that really is saying there is that if we import from other countries, goods and services from other countries, and historically it's been a little bit cheaper to get goods and services from other countries. And so if our government puts a bit of a tax on those imports, well, what some are saying the purpose behind that is to protect the U.S. industries here from all essence losing business outside of the country. So if it's more expensive to bring it into our country, maybe we focus on the idea of having it in our country from a production standpoint. And so, preserving that U.S. type of world of industry when it comes to goods and services. Another is that, well, anytime taxes are involved, it's usually pretty good for the government. It generates tax revenue for the government. And I think most would agree that, the revenue for the government is incredibly important right now, given some of the things that we're dealing with the national debt and Social Security issues and things that we're walking into in 2025. Generating revenue for the government is always going to be key to success for the economy in certain ways. And then the other, it can be used as a bit of a tactic or influencing of trade policies and negotiations. We're seeing some of that as well this year here in 2025, as we'll talk a little bit more about this concept of trade war these battles that are happening amongst countries as far as, we're going to impose this tariff on you, and then they're going to impose this tariff on us to retaliate, and how all that plays out. It becomes a bit of this kind of trade war type of perspective of who's going to pay for what, and what are we going to be able to import and export and not be able to do. So it can be used as a bit of a tactic as well. So that's the high level. The big thing here. It's a tax that is paid on the imports, and our government, or the government that's importing it, is the one that's imposing the tax, and for multiple different reasons there.
All right. The next thing is, how are they implemented? First is, who actually sets the tariffs? Well, this is going to be your government, the government, wherever it might be. So if the United States is exporting to another country, then they can impose tariffs on the goods coming from the United States, and then vice versa. In the United States, Congress can do it. They can set tariffs, as well as, under certain circumstances, so can the president of the United States set tariffs. So that's kind of who can set it. So it's governments that set those things. And how is it applied? Well, whenever goods get to a border, they're going to get assessed, whatever the tariff is for whatever that product is. And you might hear that sometimes, where they are going to say they're going to have a tariff on certain things at one rate, and then a tariff on something else at a lower rate. And maybe some goods can come through without a tariff, because they say we need those products really bad, so we're going to let those products come in without the tariff. And so that's when you're hearing it on the news that this particular item could have a tariff. Translate tariff, if you want, to tax. And that's probably the easiest way to think about it, because we're so used to paying taxes. So you could say you're going to get taxed this much on this thing, and you're going to get taxed this much on another. And then the impact. What is the impact to importers and consumers? Well, think about it. If taxes were to go up, and a company were having to pay higher taxes, what are they going to do? They're going to raise the price of the goods. Same thing's going to happen if there are tariffs that have to be paid, or taxes that have to be paid on goods that we are trying to import into, let's say in our case, the United States. Then the companies that are buying those goods, whoever they might be, they're going to buy them at a higher price, which means what? They're going to have to raise prices to the consumers. So, that's the impact. Okay. The impact is, we could slow down imports, slow down exports, but we could also have higher pricing. And that's what you're hearing right now in the news, is how is this going to really play out? And you've actually heard that, an admission from any of the parts of the government that say we want to impose tariffs, that in fact it could create higher prices for a period of time. So that's kind of the information that we're getting. But now, when you hear about tariffs in the news, I think a popular one is with, China in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to give just a little, and I think you talked about this already, about the trade war and kind of how that played out.
Yeah. So, if we go back into history, you don't have to go too far back. It's 2018, 2019, when the U.S. and China had this trade war all around tariffs. What we're dealing with here today in 2025, we just don't know what's going to end up happening with that. So we can only go back and look at history. But that happened, not too long ago, and this back and forth on putting tariff increases on each other, on certain goods and imports on both sides of the coin, electronics, furniture, clothing. And then China responded with tariffs on American products such as soybeans and automobiles. And this became this big trade war. And the bottom line is, well, what was the impact? That's what most people care about, is how is this going to affect me in my retirement? And they led to, obviously, like Radon said, increased cost for the businesses, which then got pushed down for the consumers. And it became, when you think about trade wars or war in general, there's going to be disruptions to supply chains. Industries start to pivot and start to change things around, which causes its own sets of issues as well. And so there are repercussions in a few different ways of these trade wars types of things. The big thing, I think, is having a plan in place, being prepared for whatever we can be prepared for, because there's always going to be the unknown. But that's the high level on the U.S.-China trade war that happened in 18 and 19. How this one that we're kind of dealing with today plays out, we will see. And I think there are arguments for tariffs on the pro side of tariffs and on the negative side of tariffs. So, Radon, what are some of those?
Yeah, so I look at it this way: you could turn on the TV and hear some pros, and turn the channel and hear some cons, and I think that's true. There are pros and cons. But what are the arguments for them? Well, the arguments for them are protecting domestic jobs. So basically what you say is, hey, another, and this goes, by the way, either way, this particular other country, their labor force is less, so they can produce the product less. Well, we cannot produce it less here, so therefore let's put a tariff on it to make things a little bit more equal. And that's kind of the idea behind it. So what is a thing we have to think about? Well, if we don't get the good at a lower price and we pay a higher price in order for the good to be made, well, you're going to have higher consumer price. Okay. So you go, well, I want to keep the jobs in a certain location and I want to do that. But if I do that and it costs more to make it, then I'm going to have higher prices. So you kind of got to pick which battle you're trying to do here. You can see it's not real easy. And we've already talked about this, that trade tariffs can create trade tensions between governments, and it could escalate into trade disputes. And as Merce has already said, trade wars, where you kind of say, well, if you're going to do this, then we're going to do this. And sometimes you can just lock heads and that not be a real good and productive thing. But here is the biggest thing that happens to us. We're called Secure Your Retirement. So really, what's the impact to a retirement plan? So let's hit on that one.
Yeah, so it could go in a few different ways. One that we've talked enough about already in the short podcast is, well, it could result in increased living cost. Or, one could view that as a kind of a forced inflationary type of environment. And with retirees living on, this mentality of, hey, I've got what I've got, there's flexibility there to have inflationary years. I think every financial plan should have inflation factored in to make sure that we have the flexibility for whether it's tariffs that caused inflation or, go back to 2020, it was the pandemic and what the government did, which had nothing to do with tariffs that caused inflation. So those things are always going to be coming our way. But that is the risk, and the scary part of what we're dealing with is our costs going up when we're already in this inflationary environment as it is. The other is the investment considerations. What we are living through now, and it happened in 2018 and 19, is this uncertainty of how the trade wars were going to play out. And if I'm all in on, one particular investment or one particular strategy, I could be at risk for significant loss as we have volatility creep up on us. And the volatility really creeps up because there's just a lot of things at play here when it comes to the uncertainty of how long these trade wars are going to last. What is the resolution of it? Do we lose some of our relationships with other countries because of this? And, do we ever get back to a more affordable way of living because tariffs raised our costs? So that's where volatility starts to come in. So what can we do? The biggest thing is staying informed. And then I think having a predetermined plan in place that kind of, accounts for a lot of different potential scenarios coming into play. So I think we call it our peace of mind pathway. Raiden, you want to walk a little bit through what that is and why we believe it's so important for a scenario like tariffs or a scenario like something else that could come at us next year?
Yeah, we worked real hard to try to come up with a way that we could have a process that people could see it all put together. So our peace of mind pathway, the purpose of it is to put together a structure, take out all the complication, and put things in a way that people can easily see it, understand it, implement it, and keep it working, and that we can work along with them in this team environment. So it really starts with our peace of mind roadmap, and that really, the core there is our retirement-focused financial plan. And I think that one's key because we can run scenarios of higher inflation. We can run things where we say it's going to cost more money to live, and we can stress test the plan. And it looks at everything. It looks at the investments. It looks at the income plan. It looks at taxes. It looks at healthcare. It looks at your estate plan. It's looking at all of those things. And then once we have all the plan planned out, we got the plan, then we got to go implement the plan, and then we got to take care of the plan. That's what we call our nurturing program, where we're going to nurture that plan to make sure that it works. But I think one key element that I want us to close on is really that investment strategy. And the investment strategy is so important as we're getting ready for and living in retirement. The investment strategy, we believe, for most of our clients is what we say, let's have peace of mind first. That means that we're not going to go for unlimited risk with unlimited downside or heavy potential downside. Now, how much that risk is can vary, and we have buckets that we can actually adjust on that. So could you quickly, Merce, as we close up here, kind of talk about that bucket strategy and why it's so powerful?
Yeah, I think it's very powerful, and we like to keep it simple. It's I think, we've experienced it's a great investment strategy, and it goes to in your head if you're listening and you would agree with this statement of, hey, I've only got so many years left of savings and earnings, and I'm gonna retire. I'm already retired, and I've got what I've got, and I want to make a decent rate of return. I just don't want to lose a bunch of money like I did in 2008. With that big financial crisis, we believe the bucket system works rather well. So we can take different types of risk and different types of scenario or segments with our money. So we believe in 3 buckets: the cash bucket, and that's as simple as, you could view it as your emergency fund or your on-hand money just for things that come up. And we want to be, in a comfortable place there. So we let clients typically decide how much cash do you like to have on hand. Once we know that, then we look at what we call the safety and income bucket. And that is really, we're taking into account, what do we need to generate an income to cover our essential income needs and some of our wants maybe. And we want to have that flowing in a regular, predictable manner that's not correlated to the stock market, that's not exposed when the markets are having issues and volatility like we are seeing today. And so, it could be your Social Security is in that bucket, maybe a pension. But on top of that, we need safe assets that are going to generate a good return, but also that when the market's down 30%, we know that this bucket will not be exposed to any market losses. So that way, as we're withdrawing over here, we're never withdrawing when it's down. That's the key piece here. Then our third bucket, that's our risk bucket. We call it the growth bucket. It can go up and down. It's the market. It's those riskier assets. And we wanted to have more of this longer term approach. We don't want to be going into this bucket every single month for our own paycheck. We wanted to have a longer term time horizon so that if we do run into tougher years in the market, well, we've got a lot of our income covered through the income and safety bucket. And the growth bucket really becomes a long-term vehicle or more of an emergency. Hey, I need a little bit of extra cash this month type of vehicle. But the key is we're not tapping into it every single month on the month. It lets the growth or the stock market do its thing. And over there, we also want to be very well diversified. So we don't just say, let's put in stocks and bonds. We like to run several strategies within that growth bucket, from stocks in multiple strategies there to bonds if we need bonds, but also including alternative assets like public liquid investments, public alternative investments, as well as private alternative investments for our accredited investors. And that just keeps adding more slices to the pie so that we can take advantage of good market years, but also we are very well diversified if we do have some of that volatility creep up on us.
All right. Well, we hope, as always, this is giving you some things to think about. If we have brought up anything that you do want to talk about, feel free to go to our website, top right-hand corner, click on schedule a call, and our calendar comes right up, and we would love to be able to have a conversation with you. But we hope you have a great week. We'll talk to you again next Monday. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Secure Your Retirement. If you would like to learn more, we have actually created an online course called 3 Keys to Secure Your Retirement. This video course helps you to think through all the different steps as you get ready to plan for and live throughout retirement. You can access this by going to our website, pomwealth.net. In addition, you can also subscribe below to our podcast called Secure Your Retirement.
For more retirement tips, check out these videos. Also, if you find them valuable, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a like.